There's so much information out there on social media. How do you know what's right and what's wrong? And
Right.
you've got the supplementations, and then you've got people on meds and how meds affect your gut and all that kind of stuff. I think people don't understand how important your gut is for your immune system. I will admit, with all the COVID stuff coming out, it's like, really had no idea my immune system was made out of my gut. I mean, I learned that during COVID when I started listening to all these podcasts. So it's an important part.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, here with you every single week, and it is time for one of my favorite episodes. So it's become a little bit of a tradition where in December, we do our top 10 of the year. So today is our top 10 of 2022. And what's also a bit of a tradition is that one of you, our podcast listeners or our members, joins me for this episode. So today we have Deanna with us. Dee, welcome back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yeah, you were here with us before, but this one's a little bit different because with the top 10, now I have to tell everybody, this top 10 is not based on data. It is not based on anything other than our personal preferences, right? So
correct.
Dee, you picked 5. I picked 5. And we're going to share them with you guys so that whether you have extra time to listen over the holidays or you've missed a bunch, maybe this will guide you for where to go back. So before we get into it, though, Dee, I have to ask you, any fun news? What are you doing for the holidays?
My youngest will be home from college, so that'll be fun. Other than that, I think we're just playing low key for a little bit.
Nice.
And you?
I am going to be in Orlando.
Oh.
Yeah. Get a little sunshine, a little touch of Disney in there, hanging out with family.
Oh, that'll be fun. That'll be a blast. I've heard it's a great time to go to Disney.
Yeah. We went last year, so we're only doing a little bit this year, but yeah. So also, should we fill everybody in? Because you are becoming a health coach.
I am becoming a health coach. Yes. Exciting, scary.
Yeah, it's good. We're going to work together, help more people. It's awesome. Changing the lives, right?
Changing the lives. Yeah.
All right. So we'll get into our first one after we tell our members what they're getting this week. So members, your recipe is for turkey stuffed delicata squash. So full disclosure, I have an obsession with winter squash, and I am now sharing that with you. It really is, though, like an all-in-one meal. Like the ground turkey and the squash. You could certainly use a different alternative. Like you could use the same recipe with lentils or jackfruit or something instead of the ground turkey if you want to make it plant-based. It's great whether you're having people over or you just want something a little different. And then, since it's December, the last month of the quarter, it means it is time for your live Q&A session, which we're doing as a one-on-one. So you get 30 minutes, just you and me, whatever you want to discuss. I have absolutely loved the conversations that we've had so far, and I can't wait to connect with you. So, by the way, I should mention, there are times available in January because while I'm away, we won't schedule anything. But there are times available in January. You just have to get it on the calendar now. So, Dee, I'm going to put you on the spot. Why did you become a member?
I thought the content that you were offering within the podcast has been awesome, but I have an obsession with recipes. I suffer from the checkout line magazines. And so I have this obsession of loving to look through recipes. And so that was one of them. Just really, really good information on there. Just love it all. And I've shared so many recipes of yours, tried them. In fact, we did the broccoli pomegranate one for Thanksgiving. It was really good. Yeah.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
it. So if you're curious, guys, here's how you join. You go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. It's $10 a month. You get weekly recipes, monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It really is a total deal. When you take advantage of the full offerings, you save far more than that $10 cost. And I say it every time, it is a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, being a member supports this podcast and this community because I would love to continue to do this with you every week. So remember, here's what you do. You go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes because that's probably easier than remembering the whole long thing. Once you're there, you click support now, type your email and payment, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the turkey stuffed delicata squash and access to your quarterly live session, just you and me. All right, let's do this. Our top 10 in no particular order. Dee, start us off with your first one.
Okay. I start off with episode number 132, Matters of the Heart and Metabolism. And it featured Dr. Philip Ovadia. And that was in February 9th of this year, obviously.
Yeah.
I loved it because I thought it's really, to me, interesting to hear a doctor's perspective and why he does what he does. I mean, he has a book, and I know you had him on there. He talked about it too, which is really good. I actually bought the book. It's been a really good eye-opening thing. That was the other thing. And it's just interesting to hear a doctor's take on our medical and on our nutrition and everything that you talk about.
Yeah. So Dr. Ovadia is a cardiothoracic surgeon. So this was one of our heart health episodes. I try every February, right? Give us a little heart health for Heart Health Month. So he had his own battles with weight. I want to say it was like 100 pounds that he removed from his body, and all these things changed. And his big thing, his book is called Stay Off My Operating Table, right? Or something like that. And it's really about how everything he learned in how to treat is not actually what treats or prevents. And so he's really now big on helping people understand the truth about foods and lifestyle medicine and all of those pieces. It's, I loved having this conversation. A couple of my favorite quotes, he said, "Meds will not make us better." Like, amen, right?
Correct.
Right. And it's so interesting. So he said, metabolic health, insulin resistance is clearly a much more significant risk factor for heart disease than LDL cholesterol. And it goes back to what we've been led to believe, what we've been told about cholesterol and heart disease versus the reality of metabolic health.
Yeah. That really stuck out. And actually, after that episode, I actually went and had my fasting insulin tested because it's not included in any of your quote unquote standard tests, but you can request it,
right?
And they'll do it for you. Well, most practitioners would do it for you. But I think that it's interesting that when he said that, I'm like, I've never been tested for that. But they always talk about your cholesterol, but they never test anything else to see what your insulin is.
Right. And listen, a lot of our doctors are trained to what they were trained to, which does not necessarily include the lifestyle piece of this. And we're going to talk more about this stuff in the new year, but there's genetics and then there's epigenetics, and epigenetics are all about lifestyle, right? You can't change your genes, but you absolutely can change how your genes manifest, right? And that's all of our lifestyle choices.
Yeah. And didn't he say in there somewhere, like, you go to medical school 8 years and then you're in your residency for so many years, and the amount of time that they spend on nutrition is so minimal that he feels that that's a big piece that's missing as well. And I've actually heard other doctors say the same thing. They're just not trained in nutrition. They're trained in what they're going to school for. He was a heart surgeon. That's what he really focused on.
Exactly. And the nutrition that they are taught, it's like, in the grand scheme of med school, it's like 3 hours, not 3 credit hours, like literally 3 hours one day, right? At least according to some doctors that I've worked with. And it's interesting because also the kind of nutrition they're taught is also sort of antiquated. So,
Right.
there are some incredible nutritionists and dietitians out there, but it's similar to some degree in a lot of those programs as well, that we got to get a lot of this stuff updated. But that's maybe a conversation for another day.
Another day, right?
All right. So that was number one.
That was number one.
We ready for number two?
Number two.
All right. So I'm going, maybe this is sort of connected to the heart health thing, right? I'm going Sex Ed for 2022 featuring Justine Ang-Fonte. So this was episode 134. It aired February 23rd. And so a little behind the scenes on this episode. So we had originally recorded like in December to air it in January. We recorded in person and the files disappeared. It was like they were gone. And I, tail between my legs, had to email her and say, would you be willing to do this again? Because I wanted to have this conversation. And she was a guest that was referred to me by another podcaster. So she was lovely and wonderful and was willing to do it again. And I have to tell you, I think the episode that we ended up publishing was way better than the one that we had originally recorded. So as they say, right, like everything works out for a reason. But she is an educator. She worked in some schools and ended up in the middle of, some controversy here in New York City with what she was teaching. But what I appreciate most is that she's really coming to this topic that I think a lot of people are afraid of. And she's coming to it without the fear. And she's helping all of us come to it without the fear or the awkwardness. And, and my big thing when we did this episode was like, we could not talk about it. We could not talk about it with the kids in our lives, but they're going to learn it from somewhere. And all this is really about is helping ensure that the information they get is helpful, health supportive, and accurate because they're going to get it somewhere.
Yeah. Yep. Kids learn a lot on the bus.
Right.
Not that it's good.
For sure.
But they learn a lot on the bus.
Yeah. It's a lot, right? It's complicated, but, she taught us tools for, using a commercial or a TV show to have the conversation, or even teaching kids about, what it means for like a body part to be private. Right. And it's really interesting because I think there's a lot of concern around these topics insofar as thinking that we're promoting sexual activity or whatever. And in my experience and in having this conversation and talking to a lot of people since, I think it's exactly the opposite. I think we empower people with the tools and the language to be able to have boundaries and to understand where those boundaries are. And that the less we talk about it, that's what's creating more of the challenge, I think.
Right. I always thought, because my kids, so I have a 26-year-old and a 19-year-old. So we've obviously been through this already. But, you think about the sitcoms that, like, we watched Friends. Well, you go with Friends, the things that are even talked about and how it's talked about on there. And then they watch that and then they're still watching the reruns and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, you sit back as a parent, like, oh my gosh. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were watching this when they were really young. So I've told mine, it was always sensationalized from those sitcoms. And, I said, there's more to it than that.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. Tough conversations to have, but good conversations to have.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what she said. Many conversations actually have nothing to do with intercourse, but everything to do with identity and sexuality, that's really sex ed. And to your point too, teaching people what's entertainment versus what's reality.
Right. Yeah. Exactly right. Yep. Good conversations.
I loved that one. And by the way, it is now our top most downloaded episode.
The sex in 2022 or sex ed one?
Yeah.
Good.
Right?
Yeah. Obviously it was a topic that needed to be talked about.
Exactly. All right. Hit us with your next one. This will be number 3 of our top 10.
Okay. The single best exercise you can do. And that featured Jordan, is it Sayat? Is that how you say his name? Sayat. And that was actually pretty recent. That was November 16th of this year.
Uh-huh.
And he was a trainer, or he is a trainer. I'm also a personal trainer. And so what was really interesting in that is, and I always tell everybody that I'm working with, it's like, just get some movement. I'm like, we can all walk, yes. Right? We can all walk. And that was his thing. It's like, it's the best exercise that any of us can do, but it's probably the least thing that we do. And we don't feel like just walking is good enough. And that we all feel like we have to, like, you know, CrossFit ourselves to death,
right,
before we feel like we're actually getting a workout. As you know, Jen, I'm in my 4th week after detached retina of having to be very low key, which is a very difficult thing.
I don't know how you did it, but
yeah, I'm walking. I'm doing a lot of walking and no running. So
exactly,
probably built what my body needed, but I thought that was really good. The other thing that I thought about that was that he explained about exercises that are just, there's no purpose for them. And coming from a personal trainer to another personal trainer, you're going, well, then why is it even out there? Right.
Yep.
You know, it's like, you know, you guys were talking about plank jacks and mountain climbers. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, well, what about burpees?
I know. So burpees were also on my list. If you go to his social media, he did a thing on burpees too. I don't like burpees, but
yeah, who does?
Right. And his whole thing, by the way, right, is when we talked about some of these other exercises that maybe aren't serving a purpose or are just more likely to injure us than to help us, right? It was a lot about combining things that don't need to be combined. And that when we combine things, sometimes it makes both sides of it less efficient, rather than thinking that we're being more efficient by doing 2 things at once with our time. You know, but this really, so I got a lot of feedback on this episode that people loved his no nonsense. It is what it is. And I'm going to tell you when I think something is dumb, you know, like, And it really does remind us the importance of, I always say, whenever I talk about exercise, I'll call it activity and movement, because walking counts.
Right.
We talked about circling your couch, pacing while you're on the phone, like little things that we think aren't sufficient really are.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. I've told my people that same thing. I'm like, I do a lot of seniors. I'm like, if it's too slick outside, walk around your kitchen. Same thing.
Yep. Do
that. The other thing that I thought was really good that he said is like, people don't get fat Thanksgiving to New Year's. They get fat New Year's to Thanksgiving. I'm like, I had to back it up for a minute and go, what did he just say? I thought that was really, really good. Yeah. Really good. Yeah.
I loved that one. And he said, you know, there is zero question in the data. The populations of people who live the longest walk the most.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yep. Good one.
Yep.
That's a good one. I forwarded that to a friend of mine who thinks that, you know, that 90% of your heart rate is the best way. And I forwarded it to him, like, maybe just walk on your off days. And sometimes it's good for us. Yep. It helps our brain too.
Absolutely. From the cellular level to every level, walking is incredibly helpful. Yep, all right. Next one is health and nutrition for kids and teens. So this was episode 163 from September 14th. That was my birthday.
It was. And was I not on that one?
Yeah, that is the one you joined us for.
Yeah, it was.
So this is another one where I was surprised. I guess maybe surprised is the wrong word. I guess pleasantly surprised. I don't know. People really responded to this one. And I think people aren't talking about it enough. And maybe that's happening in the context of helping people and young people develop confidence. So this whole conversation came out of the program that I do with kids and families. And the underlying assumption is that the younger person is metabolically challenged already, right? That there is a challenge around, you know, food behavior and the relationship with food or activity or these kinds of things. And there's a lot to say in terms of, you know, helping people feel confident in their skin no matter what. And there's also something to be said for, we didn't learn this information and that's how we ended up where we are. It makes sense then that kids wouldn't have this information either, right? Unless we teach it to them. And that's what this is. It's about how do we talk about these things in a way that makes sense, right? Maybe, I say too, it's like they're seeing the same things on social media. They're seeing all these things, but how can we put it in a context that resonates for them? It's like, all right, we're at school. Here's the vending machine. What's our best choice out of what's here? Or you're at a friend's house. How do we want to handle this? And it's really empowering them versus, having that grip over your kid's food. Yeah.
And it starts there.
Yeah.
Right. It starts when they're young. So, now I've got one in college and he says, I try to do my best, Mom. I try to do my best.
Yeah.
Because he knows.
And by the way, your best is all you can do.
That's right. That's right. When this is all you're presented with, you got to try and make the best choices. But he's 19 and he's been raised to know, right? We talk a lot about it. There's a lot that it's never talked about because even their parents don't know and understand. And so they only know what they know to help their kids. And so this was, I think, is a very, very good one. I think this one, there was a lot of little topics in there. I think we talked about, it's like, we could go a little deeper into that, a little deeper into that. So there's multiple things to talk about in that one for sure.
Absolutely. The other thing, speaking of other things we talked about in there. So I talked about how, with a new habit, we can ask them if they want help and who they want help from and what would that help look like, right? And having this conversation with them. And it strikes me now as I'm looking back on this episode, like if you have anyone in your life, whether it's a kid or not, that you're supporting in their health habits, listen to this one because it's the same kinds of conversations that we would have. It's the same conversations I'll have with an adult client, right? What would it look like for your partner to be, helpful in this versus feeling like your partner or your parent is the food police?
Yep. I grew up with the food police.
You and so many. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm the food police for her.
I'm sure she loves that. Karma, right?
That's exactly right.
All right. Take us to your next one.
Okay. Ooh, I loved wearable health tech. And you and I had at one point talked a little bit about it. And even when you even said this, okay, and the date on this one, it's been recent too. This was in November as well, I believe.
Yes.
Or
this was the week.
It hasn't been very long ago.
Yeah, this was the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And
episode 173, if you're a numbers person.
Episode 173. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Is his take on it science-based versus exercise-based. I thought that was really good, especially in the profession I'm in. Plus, I wear an Apple Watch. Plus, I also wear a heart rate monitor, and I compare them a lot. And really, honestly, I'm like, how in the world does that Apple Watch know what my pulse is or my heart rate is when it's taking it through the top? And I heard you, and when you asked him that, I'm like, yes, how does that work?
I'm so glad that
awesome.
You guys resonate with my silly questions sometimes.
Yeah. I'm like, I've said that same thing. I'm like, well, that's not where my pulse is. So that was really, really good. Apple has done a phenomenal job because I compare them a lot. They're only off a little bit.
Yeah.
And so technology has come a long way with that. Like we've talked even to the concern with that is people like me, who I would consider myself OCD with exercise sometimes, it could go bad in a different way. But his take on it was really, really, really good. And I love the fact that he kind of compared the Apple Watch versus the Garmin versus the other one. I thought that was really, really good too.
Yeah, I loved it. So for those of you who didn't hear this one, so I had a conversation with Ted Kritzonis. So he's actually a journalist and he reports on a lot of tech things. So he's tried all of these things and he's spoken to those, not just their PR people, but the manufacturers and, gotten into the nitty gritty to try to compare them. And I will tell you, for years, since starting this podcast, I have tried to find somebody who can explain how it is actually calculating those calories, that it says what you burned, right? And how is it actually each of these devices, like what's in them? How are they working? And nobody will tell us this because that is their proprietary information. And so when I was introduced to Ted, I was like, great, you have enough that we can have this conversation. So we talked a lot about how to choose the right one. If you're buying a gift for somebody, which one might be the right one for them? And then how do we translate the information that it gets us? Because I've always said to my clients, use it as a relative barometer for day to day versus honing in on the absolute numbers of it. And he reinforced that. But we also talked about how working with somebody to help you understand the numbers creates the context, because the device only has numbers. It does not understand anything else that is going on in your life. So especially considering sleep trackers and some other things like that. Like, we can use some support around understanding what these numbers mean and then taking that learning to make adjustments.
Yeah. I think it's a great tool to help people. Yeah. And for people like you, people like me that are working with other people, I mean, I can tell you, I've been to plenty of sporting events and I have my Apple Watch on, and you clap, jump, do whatever, get excited. And I'm telling you what, you can work a lot. You can get a lot of steps in and not move.
Yep. Yep.
And I was like, I'm like, really? That's wild. I walked a lot, but I didn't move for 4 hours.
Right. I remember when I think Fitbit was the first one where you could like link your devices with other people and sort of compete. And I remember years ago being at a dinner and people would sit there with their arm like waving, trying to get extra steps, even though we were sitting at dinner.
I remember that too. Or they put it on their dog and then you go play Frisbee with your dog. So there's ways that you can manipulate the data.
But I do
manipulate the data.
Right. I hope and I think that some of those, as you said, have gotten a little bit more sophisticated in terms of even knowing the size of your stride, so that if it ended up on the dog, it would be a little weird. Like, it might notice something's off. Maybe that's giving them too much credit, but I don't know.
That's crazy. I just think it's a cool thing. I may actually change from Apple to Garmin. I don't know. I'm going to have to check them both out.
Are you a runner?
Now. I'm more so a runner than anything, but probably I prefer to swim, but you're going to laugh because my heart rate monitor doesn't work when I swim and it irritates me. So I don't swim. So
don't do it. Exactly.
Yeah. My Apple Watch tracks
tracked,
it,
did it happen?
Right. So I'm like, well, it's not counting on my heart rate app, but it's counting on my Apple Watch. So it counts.
There you go.
And then it's like, truly, I'm like, and then you're guessing on the length of the pool. And so there's a little bit of, variability.
Yeah. Well, whether you're an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, a Whoop, a Garmin, an Oura Ring, we talked about it all.
Yep.
So, all right, that was 5 of our top 10. Let's do a quick break for a message from our partner for this episode, and then we'll do the last 5. All right, our partner for this episode is Lumiere de Vie Skincare. Lumiere de Vie was founded by Amber Ridinger McLaughlin in response to her own experience of mere marginal results from countless costly creams. She realized the revitalization of her youthful skin could only occur if she developed products herself. Working closely with beauty scientists and exploring the most advanced ingredients derived from the earth and sea, Amber created Lumiere de Vie, the next generation of skincare. The extensive line of luxury skincare products is designed to address all skin types and concerns, with the highest quality natural ingredients and powerful formulas that help heal, soothe, moisturize, and protect. Lumiere de Vie acts as first aid for your skin. The result is rejuvenated, luminous, beautiful-looking skin. So it might be a little late to get Lumiere as a gift if you need one for this week. However, it is not too late to get a gift for yourself, right? So with the winter weather, maybe it's time to give your skin a little extra attention and hydration. So you could do the Lumiere de Vie Hydrate 3.0. So that's a hyaluronic acid serum. Or you could do the Lumiere Elixir, This elixir is amazing. So you can mix it with your moisturizer or put it on after your moisturizer. I also use it on my elbows and my feet. I love this one. Maybe I'll bathe in it. That's a good idea. All right. So, so the elixir is only $44. If you're ready to upgrade your evening moisturizer, I highly recommend the Intense Rejuvenation Cream. That one's $62.50. Of course, all these prices are before your 10% off and free shipping for being a Salad with a Side of Fries listener. So to get this deal for yourself or somebody on your gift list, if you're, that's not going to be the free shipping. P.S. If you're doing like expedited overnight, get it as fast as possible shipping. But anyway, text the word SKIN, SKIN, to 844-947-4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word SKIN to 844-947-4846 to try Lumia DV Skincare. Get 10% off and free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, Dee, we're on number 6. Oh, this is one of mine.
Yep, that's you. Yep.
So number 6 was episode 157 called Circa, Your Circadian Rhythm. So this aired August 3rd. And I love this one because not only is sleep something that people totally don't understand, right? Like we think we do. It allowed us to talk about sort of the implications between morning routines, evening routines, sleep, and how and when we fuel. So this was also, if you're curious about intermittent fasting, if you know people who are intermittent fasting, definitely listen to this one.
That's a good one. My sister-in-law is going through some intermittent fasting. So I'll forward that to her.
Yeah. Fasting is complicated and not my favorite approach, especially for women.
We had to talk about that the other day. So
yeah. Yeah. Anything about this episode strike you?
No, other than the importance, how important our sleep is. And people kind of discount that. You always hear a lot of people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's actually, and I was one that I didn't get a lot of sleep a lot of times, but I've gotten so much better at it, and you feel so much better.
Yeah.
So much better.
I'm a constant work in progress on the sleep, because in some weird way, I'm both a morning person and a night owl. I don't know how that, again, we've probably trained ourselves to be that way. But one of the things that really struck me in, doing some extra research for this and putting it together. So, and the US always has sort of different regulations or thoughts than other parts of the world. So this one was really interesting. So in the UK, they define a shift worker as somebody who misses 2 to 3 hours of sleep between the hours of 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. for 50 days of the year. Okay, 50, that's like once a week, right? There's 52 weeks a year. So if once a week you're up, between 10 and 5 for 2 to 3 hours, right? The body interprets that as a shift worker. And what's even more interesting is that it can take like a couple days for our internal clocks to recalibrate after we've had that experience of being awake in those hours, which means that even if we think of it as only 1 day a week, right? But if it happens once and then it's actually a couple days before we recalibrate, very much our biology living modern lives is that of a shift worker, which really messes with our rhythms.
Yeah.
On the plus side, though, you're not doomed. You can absolutely remedy your circadian rhythm. So we talked about all that stuff, too.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good.
All right. Yep. Number 7. Go for it.
Okay. It was number 169, how your immune system is like Goldilocks, because it has to be just right. And that was aired October 26th.
Yes.
Christine. Yeah.
So Christine is an acupuncturist, but she and I do a lot of work together. So we were having this conversation from some other things that we were doing. And I was like, we should do this as an episode. So we did. Right.
Yeah. I thought what was really good about you guys did a great explanation of our systems, how food affects those systems, how vitamins affect those systems, and when to take your vitamins. And then the best saying that you had in that, and I know you've said it in probably other episodes too, is that our skin is our intestines turned inside out.
Yeah.
And I wrote down, yikes, because I'm thinking, as you're talking about the Lumiere de Vie, like right now, and your skin's so dry, I'm like, wow, I hope that's not my insides too. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. So, because with the immune system and thinking about it like Goldilocks, right? When it's underactive, the just right thing. So, underactive immune, we have sickness, illness, and disease and symptoms, even if that's the cold or flu, right? When it's overactive, that's autoimmune. So it's this idea of balance is really what we're after with our immune system. And so then especially looking at the rest of our lifestyle choices and our food choices and supplementation, how does that fit in? Because there are some herbs and botanicals that are better for when we feel something coming on. And then there are some that are better for us all the time to sort of have that baseline, right? But we don't necessarily, more is not always better.
Right.
You know?
And that's what's hard is there's so much information out there on social media. How do you know what's right and what's wrong? And you've got the supplementations, and then you've got people on meds and how meds affect your, you know, your gut and all that kind of stuff. I think people don't understand how important your gut is for your immune system. And I myself included, I will admit, you know, with all the COVID stuff coming out, it's like, really had no idea my immune system was made out of my gut. I mean, I learned that during COVID when I started listening to all these podcasts. So yeah, it's an important part.
Yeah. And we also talked about too, the different parts of the immune system, not just your gut, but like your spleen and bone marrow and, you know, the complement system and white blood cells and antibodies and T cells and all these sort of like buzzwords that we hear all the time. In thinking back on it, like I think we did a good job of helping people understand really what all those things are and how they function, so that even when we start to hear about all the things in, I hate to call it pop culture, but like in the world of living in this world with COVID and flu and RSV this year and all these things, that we have a different understanding of the words that we're hearing, you know?
Yeah. It was a great episode. One I highly recommend. I recommend them all.
Right.
But
well, I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Our next one is breakfast. Is it really the most important meal of the day? So this was from June 22nd, episode 151. This is another one where, you know, we did a breakfast nutrition nugget a long time ago. And then it's sort of continuing that conversation of what people are hearing out there. And, you know, in my head, I have to admit it was sort of a toss-up between this one and what is clean eating. And even the plant-based versus carnivore diet episode, because it's all about trying to reconcile what we know for ourselves, what we hear in the world, what we hear from various experts, you know, and it can be very confusing. So we talked a lot about, like, where did that idea even come from of breakfast being the most important meal of the day? What happens when we don't eat breakfast? All the people fasting. And then even what we have for breakfast and when we have that meal and all of these pieces that come into this. So, you know, spoiler, breakfast is important, but breakfast is your first meal, you know, whenever that happens.
Break fast.
There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Any key takeaways for you from this one?
I think probably, if I remember when you were talking about that too, because, you know, you break that word down, break fast is, and when people were talking about the intermittent fasting.
Yeah. I will say, just, you know, sneak peek for anybody, the first meal of the day can often be what actually leads to the afternoon coffee, cookie craving, that need for a pick-me-up later in the day. So
Is that because of what you eat, Jen? I'm trying to remember.
It can be a function of not eating enough or eating higher glycemic things or, but it's all connected. Yeah.
All connected. So listen to episode 151.
Right. All right. Go for it with your next one.
All right. So that one is episode 156, Ingredient IQ, featuring Nick Niclario.
Yeah, Nick Niclario. Yes.
Yeah. And he is the inventor of cookies. And I just loved how he shared his story. He had a sort of similar as Dr. Ovadia, had a huge weight loss. His is a little bit more in depth. So it's a really good story to listen to on that, because I think that's a lot of people's story. But then he brought to the importance of knowing the ingredients of the things that you're eating. And I know you and I have talked a lot about that too. And as you're a health coach, we talk a lot about that. And then it's interesting, we just don't pay attention to it. And then we fall prey to the marketing on the package.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's interesting too. So first of all, with Nick's story, he had an eating disorder and he speaks about it. I don't feel like I'm giving away, he talks about it. And it's also interesting because he went to culinary school as part of his work on his relationship with food, which I think is really interesting. And then my favorite part of this episode is really when we talked about a lot of the foods that are used in the quote unquote healthier versions of foods that may not have some of the downsides, but also aren't necessarily offering us much benefit, right? Like, are they functional? So I loved that piece of this conversation.
Yeah. And you've tried his omelet cookies and I have not been able to find them in the grocery store. So after re-listening to that one too, I actually ordered some. I haven't got them yet, but I did order some because I'm like, I gotta try these.
They're pretty good, I will say.
Yeah.
I enjoyed them.
Always a good choice. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. We're already at number 10.
Number 10.
All right. Actually, as I look at this, I'm like, oh, that's a fitting one to end on. So this was episode 143, aired April 27th, called One Team, You and Your Body. This really, what inspired me for this episode is how often, first of all, a client said this to me. He said, I feel like I'm on the same team as my body now. But I think so often we start this process or we come to these conversations feeling like we're fighting with our bodies. That we want it to do one thing and it's doing something else. Or we're trying to keep it from, doing whatever we think it's going to do. Or, we want it to serve us in this workout or work out harder or better or stronger or whatever. And there seems to be this like constant tug of war for people. And there really is, a communication with the body and a process of relearning that conversation, which we also talked about in other episodes. But this one was really about like, how can we start to work with our bodies and use the information that the body is communicating to us to help us keep moving forward.
Right. That brings to mind, and it's been a while since I listened to this episode, was, if something hurts, your body's trying to tell you something, but we just ignore that. We want to ignore that because we don't want to get old. Like, it'll go away. It'll go away.
Yeah. So I said, in this episode and in others, pain is the body screaming at you.
Right.
Right. It's usually more subtle than pain to start, but when we don't listen, right, it's going to get louder and louder. I also think, and I talked about it in this episode, that with years of dieting or following this plan and that plan and whatever it is, there are rules with those plans. And we follow the rules instead of following ourselves and following our bodies. And we teach ourselves out of paying attention to our bodies. So, it's like, stop the rules. The rules make us ignore our bodies. And a shift from judgment of what our body is doing to observation of what we're experiencing and what might the body be trying to tell us based on what we're experiencing. It's that like curiosity versus judgment thing.
Right. That brings to mind, like when you go into the doctor and, you present a symptom. So that's because that's what has brought us in to the doctor, not necessarily what the cause of the symptom is, but the symptom has brought us in for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, Dee, we did it. The top 10 of 2022, or really our top 10, but top 10.
Oh, wow, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Because there's a lot. There's a lot of information out there. And you provide a lot of good information.
Well, thank you. It's funny, in looking back on the year, I admit I had a tough time getting it down to just 5, even knowing the 5 that you had chosen already. I had a hard time getting it down to just 5, but all I can say, I guess, to, sum up the top 10 is to say, like, thank you to everybody, all of you, for listening, for sharing with people in your lives, for taking this information and, helping yourselves with this information. And like I said, paying it forward and then really asking questions, showing up, doing the things, and helping me create all of this for you. And for myself, let's say, right? We always say what we need to hear ourselves. So,
Yeah.
Just thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. And your guests are amazing.
Thank you.
I follow Dr. Ovadia too. I go through listen to some of his podcasts. And so there's just so much information out there. I think there's a lot of good information, a lot of misinformation. So you're such a good resource, because sometimes I'll text you and go, this is what I just heard. What?
Right. Well, thank you. I'm happy to be. I appreciate your feedback on the guests and everything too, because, a lot of people are pitched to me and, reach out to me to be on the show. And I believe that, part of it's the way I structure this podcast, which is a little bit different from how other people do things. But, I feel like somebody on this show, if we're having a conversation, we're giving this airtime, it's an inherent endorsement in what they're sharing. And so I take that responsibility heavily, and somebody said to me too, a while ago, that like, there isn't even confusion in the information that we share here, right? That it's not like today we're telling you one thing and tomorrow we're telling you to do a different thing, right? We might dig into different topics, but that it's not like whiplash in terms of, what we're recommending. And it all comes from the same thing, that I'm very particular and I'm hyper aware of contributing to confusion versus helping us all find clarity.
Yep. I think that's important. So important.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your feedback and listening and sharing all the things.
Yeah, it's been fun. A lot of fun.
Awesome. All right, I think it's time for our nutrition nugget. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This week's nutrition nugget is called Toss It Out. So who else, show of hands that I can't see, has a hard time throwing away food?
100%.
Right? This is a little confronting for some of us. It reminds me of what we were told. Many people were told as kids about finishing food on our plates.
No.
But like, didn't your parents say there's children starving somewhere, finish your food? So,
yes.
Right? It's so funny. We're taught all these things, or we're told these things. And when we start to think about it, right, how does me eating this food change anything for the person on the other side of the world who doesn't have food on their plate? Right? It doesn't. So what we can do, right? We want to remind ourselves, if we're done eating, the food on our plates has served its purpose. It's no longer needed, right? It does serve to satisfy, our own needs, right? But we don't need to satisfy somebody else's needs if we eat it, right? That is a disconnect. So we can think about, if we're done eating, the food has served its purpose, it is no longer needed, we can toss it, right? With leftovers, I'm giving you permission to toss them out, right? And with the caveat of saying, if it's food that you would otherwise normally eat, cool. If it's food you'd otherwise normally eat on any given day, put it in the fridge, let it be some version of meal prep, right? Make life a little easier on another day. However, if it is food that you would not typically have in your home, toss it, right? Or give it away, right? Whether that's, giving it to somebody else for them to take home, or donating it if there are places taking donations of prepared food, or bring it into an office, right? For people who are back in the office. It does not make you a bad person to get rid of food that does not serve you in your home, right? Whether it's leftovers, whether it's, what's still on our plate when we feel like we're done eating, right? You could also,
Yes.
by the way, yeah, if you're at somebody else's home and they're insisting on giving you food to take, and it's not food that you would otherwise eat, it doesn't contribute to that version of meal prep, right? I'm giving you permission to take it and toss it, or take it and give it, just like we talked about with the other things, right? Keeping that food around does not turn it into nutritious fuel, right? It does not turn it into anything, anything that for many of us, other than a potential reason to beat ourselves up, and I want to make sure that we're moving away from beating ourselves up for tossing out food. Okay. So remember that it served its purpose, it was enjoyed, and now it's time to move on. Right? It reminds me of, I'm sure I've shared this story before. I had a client, he and his wife moved into a new apartment, and people kept sending them cookies. And they were like, good God, we don't need all these cookies in our house, So they each had one of the cookies, of the different kinds. They each had one. And then they almost had like a little ceremony over the trash can. And they said, thank you, cookies. We feel very welcome in our new home. You've served your purpose. We don't need you anymore. And they threw the cookies out. If it helps to have a little ceremony like that, cool, do it, right? It's just something for us to recognize that holding on to those things, if it's creating stress or creating unnecessary temptation or creating anything other than making life easier, you have permission to toss it. Now, one other thing. You know what else we can toss? Any ideas?
Stuff.
Right. Well, yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yes, we could toss out stuff. And that includes going to the fridge and the freezer, right? Toss the stuff that's no longer good, right? If it's past its usable life, toss it. The condiments that have been in there for longer than you can even remember, toss them, right? That fruit roll-up that's now a potential weapon, toss it. I say that because, by the way, I found a fruit roll-up once in my dad's house years later after growing up. And we were like, oh my God, I can't believe this is here. And we were sort of joking about it. And then we accidentally dropped it and it shattered like glass on the floor. So that fruit roll-up that you have too, toss it. Everything in your freezer that has freezer burn, toss it, right? I believe that it is a sign of our health when we can see the difference between that which serves us and that which does not. And you don't need to keep anything in your home that does not and will not serve you. So there you have it. You have permission to toss it out. All right. Well, thank you again, Dee, for joining me. I appreciate you choosing 5 episodes and being here today. As always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or really all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Wherever it's easier, social media or the website, send a message, your takeaways, your ideas for episodes or nutrition nuggets, your questions, whatever you got, I am here. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. Or D. If you are not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/saladwithasideofries to show your support for this podcast, this community, and your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the turkey stuffed delicata squash and access to your quarterly live session, just you and me. So here's wishing you and yours the absolute most wonderful holiday season. And we'll see you here next week for one more episode of 2022. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.